So with the injury to Kendre Miller and him being out for the rest of the season, obviously Devin, Neal kind of rise up. What can you tell us about him in terms of what you've seen from him over the course of training camp and beyond?
Yeah, I'm really excited about Devin's opportunity. Obviously a young player, so the learning curve is there. And, he's done a good job. Went through a period of time there where he really wasn't active. Now he's going to be active and he's been active, and now he's back in the flow. So that's an exciting opportunity for him. He'll prepare, he'll be ready.
What was it that maybe stood out to you all about him during the draft process that you're excited to, see him be able to try to implement this weekend?
Felt like he was one of the better protectors in the draft when you talk about pass protection. He's a smart guy. He's got good football intelligence and good instincts.
We hear that a lot. I think Alvin said the same thing. Like, he's one of the smarter players. He's that with, like, how does that kind of appear in a running back? Like, what does that help when you're an intelligent player?
Well, I think, it's like anything. It's hard to quantify instincts, but when you watch the tape and you watch players play, you're like, wow, how do you know to do that? Well, that was his instincts, and I think when you're watching tape, it's, because when you get into especially the evaluation process, you can see, you have hardcore answers about how big, how fast, how strong, all those things. We get those numbers, okay? Those aren't going to lie. But then when you turn on the tape, does the player play to those things? Do they have the instincts that allows them to naturally play in the flow of a game at an accelerated speed if they are a fast guy? Because some guys that run really fast on a track don't play football fast. And some guys that don't run necessarily fast on a track play football fast because they don't slow down at all. So, it's the same thing when you're talking about a guy in protection. Does he have instincts? Does he feel things? Does he see things that maybe he gets somewhere just a little bit quicker than a guy that doesn't have those type of instincts?
How does Eric McCoy's injury just impact communication on the line and just the organization of that unit? Like, what do you guys have to overcome?
Well, obviously, throughout the season, communication has been something that we've preached and that we spent a lot of time with. The guys have taken a lot of pride in cleaning up some of the things that we've had issues with. And so obviously anytime you lose your center, that's a big part of it. It's a focal point for us this week. Obviously Luke's played in games, though. He knows what this is all about. And it's just about him getting in the rhythm with Spencer and with the rest of the offensive line and the perimeter players.
Is communication something that y'all have a way to work on even away from the field, or is that something that in the practice, in the midst of practice, that's where you have to work that through?
Yeah, one of the big things is you got to take advantage in pro football of your walkthroughs. So a big emphasis on our walkthrough communication that carries over into practice, that carries over into the games. But you're not going to get, the amount of time we have to practice and the amount of reps that we can actually put on the players, especially this time of year. You've got to get that, one, it's got to start in the meeting room. When we're doing the installation process, when we're talking through things, we're talking through adjustments versus a defense we're going to play and those type of things. You go out in the field, you get the walkthrough reps, where that's a big point of emphasis, making sure everything's right, communication's right, our procedure's right, and then obviously you take it to full speed in practice.
When Spencer was asked yesterday about the interceptions last week, he said he was more aggressive than he had been previously, and I guess it can be a fine line between aggressiveness and recklessness. How do you walk him through that so in a split second he can decide which is which?
Yeah, I think you have to take each particular snap and isolate that snap. You can't just say it's one overwhelming theme. You have to look at each snap and say, okay, here's why. If I get forced to roll to my left and I see a guy go ahead and take a big box up the sideline, well, remember, in the National Football League, these safeties are fast. So if I can't drive that ball and I got to hang it a little bit, that guy's going to come out of the middle of the field and probably make a play. So there's things like that that are, for a young quarterback, they're all part of the learning process.
Move forward in the Hall of Fame selection process. Just going back to losing Eric and making the adjustments with communication, how big is it to have someone who played the game at that position, at the guard position at such a high level, to be able to, I guess, assist the young players?
Jari does an excellent job for us, and he's been a big asset for us, especially, being a new staff. The amount of knowledge he has of, when we got here, of our current roster and just, he knows the history of this organization as good as anybody, and obviously a phenomenal player that really does a good job of communicating to the young players, helping them understand things, and he's done an outstanding job.
Where have you seen Tyler Shuck make the most strides in the first 7 weeks, and what have you learned over the years about the best way to help backup quarterbacks who aren't getting reps make those strides?
Yeah, it's a challenging part because obviously, in our league, the starter's going to take all the snaps, so how do you get the backup quarterback ready? And, a big part of that is trying to get them to understand, especially a young player, that the scout team is an advantage for you because you get forced to play really, really fast. Obviously, you're playing against the first-string defensive line. The hard part is that you look at the pattern concepts and those type of things. The timing with the feet and the eyes and the rhythm don't always match up. So we try to, as we go through practice, Scott Tolzien does a great job. He's with him there in those drills, talking to him, hey, let's use this timing like the route that we throw that's like this, so that we can try and build repetitions, through the scout teamwork.
Last week, that play where Devin had the blitz pick up, obviously incomplete pass or whatever, but Spencer's standing in there and having the confidence and not looking rattled as that's closing in and trusting the back. Is that just innate to a quarterback to kind of have that, or is that something that can be developed and taught?
Better have it to play in this league, because you start looking at the rush, it's over, game over. So you got to trust the guys that are around you, and that's, like I said, one of the things about Devin, just talking about, we thought he was one of the better pass protectors in college football last year. That's a big part of the game that people don't really talk about a lot with the running backs, but I promise you, defensive guys know when your back's not doing a good job protecting.
Was that pickup as good as it looked? Obviously the trained eye, the untrained eye looked pretty special. But
It was a good pickup, it really was.
He talked about how he actually had a route to run after that, but because of the game situation, he decided to stay in a little bit longer. Just what does that say to you about him? And is that a part of that intelligence factor you were talking about?
There's instincts right there. You know what I mean? Because we put the PowerPoint up, we turn on the tape and show them what it looks like on tape, but then you got to go out there and do it.
What kind of experience do you have against Todd Bowles? What are the hallmarks of his defenses?
He's a phenomenal, obviously head coach and defensive coordinator, and obviously a ton of respect for Todd. When you play Todd, it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a physical game. He's going to try and eliminate the run game. He's going to put pressure on your quarterback from all the different looks he's going to present to you, and he's going to put he's going to put pressure on all your protection schemes with the different things that he does. So a lot of respect. Obviously, George Edwards is there with him that I have some exposure to. George and I were together in Dallas, so a phenomenal coach. Their defense is as well coached as anybody in this league. They do a great job, and every game we've been in with them, it's been a true fight, man.
Understanding that third and long for third and 8 plus are low percentage plays. Is there any reason that is there a through line for you in why Dell's percentage isn't a little bit higher on those? Because I mean, you got to get some of them at some point to really kind of.
Yeah, we haven't done a good enough job of putting our guys in position to capitalize, and we've had opportunities. We haven't seized the opportunities. We all got to do a better job. Obviously, where we are is not where we want to be. We need to be better, and it's a focal point for us.
How much does losing Kendre and now going to a younger player affect Alvin in the sense that you have to figure out how much you can lean on Alvin while he's dealing with an ankle injury? How many snaps you can give him?
I think we do that every week, even when Kendre was healthy, and there's other ways that, you look at supplementing how many snaps, okay, Alvin's in, Devin's in, and where are the carries coming? Are they perimeter carries? Are they inside the tackle carries? So we, we're always cautious of that and have been the first, few games here, and we'll continue to do so.
What's the significance of counting the inside carries separately from the outside carries?
Well, a lot of times the perimeter carries, you're in space. Back has a lot more feel. It's kind of like you start running between the tackles. We know what's going to happen, right? There's going to be some heavyweight collisions in there. A lot of times, some of the perimeter runs, when you're talking about your toss cracks schemes and the G schemes where you're out there in space, the back's not usually taking as many of those downhill, slugs that they're going to get when you run between the tackles on a, downhill duo play or that type of thing.
Can you just talk a little about Luke and what you've been working with him over the past, however long, Luke Fortner, and he's going to step in this week. What has been your experience working with him?
Yeah, I remember when we made the trade for him when he showed up, you could tell, he's a pro. He's been around, and this guy started a lot of games in this league. He knows this is what he does, and, like I said, it's obviously disappointed for Eric and his injury. Obviously, that's for him, it's tragic, and we all feel for him and are with him. But, I've got a lot of confidence in Luke.
When you have another center stepping in, they might communicate a little differently, I assume, based on verbiage and things like that. Do you try to universalize that as much as possible, or does that individual nature factor?
No, it's all the communication is standardized. You can't, it's the same thing with the quarterbacks, right? The quarterbacks all have to have a standardized snap count. You can't have one guy do it one way, another guy do it the other way. You're going to have false starts, So that's something we focus on a lot too. So no, the centers, all the calls and all those things stay the same.
Are there any differences at all that factor in? Like with quarterbacks, sometimes I guess cadence is a thing that we hear talked about. Is there such a thing with centers?
There's a lot of little nuances that, that show up, just because they all have kind of their own way that they paint their picture, so to say, when they're playing center, and so some guys are just a tad bit faster on the snap count. Some guys are just a tad bit. It's just those little nuances that people probably don't see much, but that the players know exist, and that's a big part of the communication. We got to get that home, and that's been a big focus this week.
In short yardage in particular, is Taysom a guy that you're maybe worried about telegraphing something, or is it just get the ball in his hands and get downhill? And is Taysom, possibly a way that you guys anticipate sort of filling the void, so to speak, with Kendre injured?
Well, hopefully, we have enough diversity in our offense that, not one player dictates certain things. Now there's a lot of coaches too, also that'll say if you don't have any tendencies, that means you're not good at anything. So, it's okay to have some tendencies in things you do, but hopefully we've got some answers in everything we do that they don't just say, okay, this guy's there, this is exactly what's going to happen.
Whose line was that? I never heard that one.
I believe it was Chuck Knoll. The old Tom Moore.
Thank you.